All right, so this was actually one of the topics that Anne wanted me to cover, which is kind of ironic because I didn't really realize. I guess I could have, but I didn't realize she was out this week. But obviously, we're recording it so she can watch it. But I think it might have been more for the consulting group anyway. So we've had a little bit more interest in the last little bit internally, at least, in the connection or out of the box integration between Dynamics Business Central and the customer engagement or CRM application. So there is an out of the box integration that ships with Business Central, and I kind of wanted to go through that in a little bit more detail. So we'll talk a little bit first about, kind of just the overall idea of it, and then we'll actually take a look at setting it up and kind of walking through kind of the quote to cash process as that handoff happens between the two systems. So in general, the integration, is pretty decent. There's a lot of ability to customize it. Some of that, the deeper customization is definitely going to end up being in code, but there are some opportunities to customize it just sort of from a configuration perspective. There have also been some changes. They've been updating this in the most recent version of Business Central, and I know that they have additional roadmap items for it for the October release as well. So one of the biggest changes is that they switched this from being just the quote-unquote Dynamics 365 integration to being two different integrations. There's one to the common data service, and then there's one Dynamics to Dynamics 365, and that is just to sort of reflect the possibility that you might actually have a common data service database without having the customer engagement applications in it. So for anybody who doesn't know that, basically, all of the model-driven apps for the Power Platform are kind of all built on the underlying architecture that's been used, for better than a decade for the CRM application or customer engagement. But the common data service itself is basically just some basic entities in that database that are sort of designed to reflect kind of, a standard of what, typical business records look like. So, account looks like this, a contact looks like this, that kind of stuff. This is sort of a reflection just from Microsoft in general, of the idea that, maybe having all of your data in one ERP to rule them all is perhaps too inflexible, and that it might be easier to use a lot of line of business applications that do whatever it is that they do well and have some sort of central hub that can take that data and then push it out to any other system that needs it. So that's kind of the role of what the common data service is. And then the Dynamics 365 apps are just further built out applications based on the common data service. So if you had, just the common data service without a Dynamics 365 app, you can integrate things like accounts and contacts to just that part of it, and not have to worry about sales orders and other things that are kind of more specific to the sales application. With the integration itself, there's kind of two ways that it runs, and you can kind of mix and match these, right? So it's one of the things that you can configure out of the box is per integration point, per touch point. Should those records be synced manually or should they be synced automatically? If they're manual, then there's basically some buttons you actually click to say, I want to create this record in CRM, or I want to link this record to a record in CRM. And then changes after that are synced automatically. You don't have to come back and push them one way or the other. It's just the syncing in the first place, or the connection, I guess they call it, connecting the two records in the first place. So I guess the other thing is just that that whole integration is run from within Business Central. So the integration is run by a job queue, and CRM doesn't really do anything other than just receive the data. All right, so I don't necessarily I'm not going to go through all of these on here, but I wanted to put down just kind of a list of, what are the types of records that are kind of tied back and forth, and which integration do those go for. So it may not be 100% obvious here, but if there's brackets going both directions, that basically means that it's bidirectional. So, a contact, for example, in the common data service is going to be synced, with a contact in Business Central, and changes in either one can go either direction. Oh yeah, I guess the other thing too is I forgot about this, that they just renamed the common data service to DataFlex Pro. So if you see those terms, those are interchangeable at this point. In terms of how a quote or the whole process is supposed to go through, which ironically I accidentally left quote off of here, but lead, opportunity, quote, order, and then invoice. So basically, and actually, I think they've built this out more. So this is kind of one option. It is actually possible to create opportunities in sales and have those be pushed into, or sorry, the other way around, to create them in Business Central and have them pushed into sales. So you can work the opportunity in sales and then go from there. But in general, your sort of pre-sales process is expected to happen in customer engagement, and the point where it starts talking back to Business Central would actually be at the order point. So, there's on a quote, basically you can convert to an order and then submit that order. And when the order is submitted, it's pushed into Business Central or pulled if you're using the manual synchronization. And then status changes are pushed back to that order in customer engagement. So status changes are things like, when it goes to fully being invoiced, or like last shipment date, I think is another data point that gets pushed back. Also, there's an item availability service that gets published as part of this on the Business Central side. So that allows you, as you're looking at an order in CRM, you can click a button to refresh the item availability and just see how many you actually have available for that order. To be honest, I don't entirely understand why it's only on the order. You would think that would be useful on an opportunity or a quote, especially if you're trying to talk to a customer about when something might be available, that kind of stuff. But I guess it's probably possible to build that out if desired, but out of the box, the button's on the order. Any questions about that part of it? Or up until this point, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Paul, I'm curious. So the quote unquote out of the box integration here, is that just a turn it on type of thing, or what's the effort there to really set that up?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. We'll actually turn it on toward the end of this whole session. It's not, in terms of getting it up and running at a very basic level, it is fairly turnkey. I would imagine in terms of most businesses are going to ultimately have something that needs to be added to it or changed or whatever. But yeah, you can get it going with just a few clicks. So in terms of things that you can do in the front end, like I said, you can say, do you want to sync records automatically, or do you only want to do linked ones? You can also, if you're going to do automatic ones, you can set a filter for those. So, maybe I don't want to pull accounts into Business Central until the record type has been changed from like prospect to customer, for example, that kind of thing. For a lot of them, you can say, should it be one way, should it go from CRM, to Business Central, from Business Central to CRM, or should things go both ways? So that lets you have some level of control over things like, account creation. That's one of those ones that, is an account by definition something in the CRM system, or is it something in the ERP system? How should that actually work? So you have some level of control over that. And then for every record that has an integration, you can also set up a config template, which is the same thing as like a template from a configuration package for Business Central, to put in default values that might not be there, from the data that's in one system or the other. From a customization perspective, at this point, my understanding, although I have not, so I've done a customization to this on the 2018 version of it. And that would have been impossible basically to have done if it had been Business Central in the cloud, because I ended up having to change, go in and change code units and that kind of stuff, which you wouldn't really be able to do. But it's been reworked in the April release of this year, so that in theory you should be able to do basically all the customization that you need to through an extension. So you can add new entities or tables that didn't exist before. That was one of those things that you had to actually, have access to the Seaside database to be able to do previously. So in theory, it should be a pretty complete tool. You should be able to do pretty much anything that needs to be done through code. All right, and then I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how the process of the automatic synchronization actually works, because it is a little bit different depending on the source of the record. So basically, at the end of the day, for every record in Business Central, there is a shadow integration record table record that gets created, and that integration record basically has the CRM ID on it, the time that it was last synchronized, and basically the state of it if there was like an error or something along those lines. So any new record in CRM or in Business Central that's configured to be sent to customer engagement will automatically create one of those integration records. And then the job queue basically goes through and finds anything that's been modified since it was last integrated or hasn't been integrated before, and sends that off to customer engagement. While it does that, the other side, then it'll basically check the reciprocal and see, are there any records in CRM that have been modified and need to be pulled back down, and then does that. In general, these job queues will stop. They'll be placed on hold if it doesn't find anything to do for like 2 or 3 consecutive runs. So just to save on processing power. On the Business Central side, though, if you make a change to a tracked record, that basically automatically kicks the synchronization job back on. But it's a little bit different on the customer engagement side. So, if your source of like accounts, for example, is on the CRM side and you're not really changing them much in Business Central, then the account integration is going to get set on hold. And in general, there wouldn't be anything to actually get it going again because you're not modifying anything in Business Central. But there is a setting on these job queue entries that's it's called the inactivity period timeout. So it will automatically restart after however many minutes you put in there. So if you put in, 30 minutes or whatever, even if nothing has happened on the Business Central side, then it'll kick off again and go check and see if anything needs to be pulled across from CRM. So, from a timing perspective, it's kind of important to understand that because, it's definitely not a real-time synchronization if you have automatic synchronization on. It is actually real-time. No, I hit that back. It's not actually. So yeah, in general, it's going to wait for that process to actually run. From the CRM side, I think it is generally speaking real time, but on the Business Central side, it generally says, that it's been queued to go to customer engagement. So what happens if something changes in both systems, right? So if I have an account and I change the phone number in 2 different systems, obviously that's going to, some data there is going to end up being lost. Basically, the way that the integration handles that right now is if the same record has been changed in both systems since the last time it was synced, it'll basically just fail to try to sync again and say, I don't know what to do with this. And someone will have to go in and manually resolve it, basically saying, sync this to CRM or sync this to customer engagement. So that can be a little bit of a problem if if it's likely that there are going to be changes to something in both systems. This is one of the things I know is on the roadmap to make this a little bit better. So in my example, with phone number being changed in both places, that would still cause a problem, but they are working to make this so it's more of a field level check. So if I change the website in CRM, but I change the phone number in Business Central, then that wouldn't be considered a conflict because it can just take the website that was changed in CRM and take the phone number that was changed in Business Central and synchronize both so they're all on the same page. All right, so that's kind of the theoretical part. So I wanted to take a look at actually setting this up. So let's see. Where's this from? What do they call that? The assisted setup. That's what I wanted. So this is the, yeah, that's what I thought. So this is what I was saying. There's 2 tiers to this. So it's telling you basically you have to set up the common data service before you can set up the Dynamics 365 sales integration. So we'll do that first. So this is on cloud or in cloud. Both applications are in the cloud, both Business Central and customer engagement. It is possible to do this with one or the other on premises or both on premises. There's a little bit more setup that you have to do to it though. So on the cloud version, because you're kind of already signed in and it can use shared credentials to go figure stuff out, it's able to figure out this is what my CRM URL is. And I just have to sign in as an administrator. This is important because it's actually this is an administrator in customer engagement as well. It's going to set up, it's actually going to install a solution in the customer engagement side. So it needs to have some permissions in both systems.
So Paul, if we ever needed to show this for some reason, the demo environment will have both it will have the common data service and everything connections we need if it's just a BC demo environment.
So what I did for this is I went to the CDX website and provisioned a Business Central demo, and then I went to trials.dynamics.com and signed up for a sales trial using those credentials. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
You could do it the other way around too, if you wanted to. You could create a sales environment and then sign up for a Business Central trial, both from trials.dynamics.com.
Okay.
I don't entirely remember how long this takes, so if anybody has any other good questions, this might be a good time. I didn't think it was that long, to be perfectly honest, but let's see. All right, perhaps we'll come back to this. All right, so I'm gonna switch back to another environment that I had to set up in, and kind of just go through a little bit of kind of what the manual synchronization process looks like. So if I go to an item, for example, and we'll just choose, I don't know, the Rome guest chair. On the Business Central side, it adds this Dynamics 365 for sales area to the menu bar. And then all of these are fairly similar. They have the kind of the same thing. So the first one is basically just to open the same record in Business Central if it's been synced already or coupled already. Synchronize basically just forces it to sync the data. And then coupling is how you actually get them to be the same record in both systems. So if I say I want to set up coupling, then I have a couple of different options here. I can either find a record that already exists in Common Data Service. So this is actually, I guess, another point that I should point out, which is that if you try and set this up for 2 environments that already have data in them, it's not going to automatically synchronize. It has no process to figure out that the items that you've already loaded in Business Central are the same as the items that you've already loaded in customer engagement. So you either have to manually couple them like I'm doing right now, or you would have to work with, a developer to come up with some sort of process to manually couple all, or to programmatically couple all these by like item number or something like that. So I'm not going to actually sync to an existing one. I'll say I'm going to create a new record. So that's going to create a new item in Business Central called 1960, or in customer engagement 1960-S. We'll copy that. Go ahead and hit OK. So let's see. From that same area, if we look at the synchronization log, this will show what it did, right? So it actually has already gone ahead and inserted it. So it created this in CRM, and in theory, if we go back, then I should be able to open this same product in CRM. All right, so it pulled over a decent amount of information for this product. Not only did it pull over just the basic information about the product itself, but it also pulled over the pricing. And in the way that this is structured, basically, is that the price that's on the product, so the unit price here, is added to the Business Central default price list. Because in CRM, you basically have multiple price lists that define kind of the prices for the same item. So you can have multiple prices, but there are different price lists. If you have customer pricing groups set up, then those can be synchronized to additional price lists as well. So basically, your pricing that's in the Business Central side can be reflected in the CRM side. And that works reasonably well. So, all right, so we have 1960S. So we have our item in here. I could, in theory, go through, let's see, let me go back to my customers. I actually can't really remember if I synchronized one, so I'm going to, I think tray research I actually coupled already. Okay, so now I'm working this opportunity, or in sales, I can work with this account. So I can go through here and create a new opportunity. I can find it, opportunities. Create a new one. Nope, wrong button. New opportunity. Call this or chairs. So I can add I'm going to choose my Business Central price list. So my Business Central default price list, choose my pricing system calculated, add my chairs. It's pulled in my pricing from Business Central and say maybe I want to buy 5 of these. All right, so from here, then I can create my quote. I can send this off to my customer, get approval for it. A record fast sale, he probably would just enter an order. So I'm just moving through the process on the customer engagement side. So one of the things that installing the Business Central solution does is it changes a setting on the customer engagement side that basically readies it for sales order integration. So if you don't have that setting set, instead of having a submit order button here, I would have a create invoice button. And it would be able to create my invoice in CRM, and then I can mark it as paid, or there's a very, 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 very light AR process on that side. But with the settings turned on for syncing to Business Central, I get this submit order button instead. Also, note, this is what I was talking about on the order. Here's the update availability button, and you can actually see it here as well. So this is basically saying I have an order out for 5 of these, but I only have 2 in Business Central. Which, I mean, obviously is not, at the end of the day, not a problem. You can, this will go to Business Central, and, you can go through the whole process of demand planning, having purchase orders or make or whatever it is that you do for this particular product. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and submit this order. If I had automatic synchronization turned on, then in theory, the next time the job queue runs, it'll pick this up and pull it over. If I don't have it on, then I actually have to go pull it in from the Business Central side. So if I go to sales orders, kind of the same idea somewhere in here. So if I go to the sales order list, this is basically showing me my sales orders that are out there. Let's see. This is my new one, so I'm going to say create in Business Central. And now it's pulled over my sales order. So I only have, let's see, so I don't know where those 2 are. Assuming if I try to post this, it's not going to work. Or maybe it will without any location. So it let me do this without any actual inventory. All right, so let's go all the way home. So let's see here. I don't think I have that one turned on in this environment. So let's see if we go back to the order here. If I refresh this. Yeah, so it synced back, that this had actually been invoiced in CRM. And now my item availability is -3, which is probably not ideal, but depends on your process. All right, so that overall, that's the quote to cash process. Also, if I go back to the customer, I don't think I have it turned on in here yet, but in theory, if I go to invoices, it would eventually synchronize the invoices that were created in Business Central to this same area. So I'm going to have complete visibility of those items from within CRM, both sides. So I guess to this point, mostly I've been focusing on the side from Business Central to CRM, but there's also kind of the same analogous process kind of looking backwards. So if I'm in CRM and I have an account in Business Central, then I can click the same button and go look at the record in Business Central and see all the rest of the data that might be available there.
Paul, do you know what licensing you need for that button to work? Do you need to be a team member only or full user?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would think it would only be team member because you're just seeing it. You're not. I mean, you could make changes to it, but you're not necessarily, right?
Right. That makes sense.
The item availability service runs as like a service account, so you don't actually need you don't need a license in Business Central to see that data. You do, however, need a role in CRM that's basically like Business Central item availability service user or something like that. There's a role configuration, but not a license configuration.
And does that configuration happen automatically, or do you have to do that?
You have to do it per user. You have to go in and give them the role.
Okay.
In general, there's not a lot that assigns roles automatically.
So you said that there's a role for the item piece. So is there a role for each entity or each record type that's being configured?
Not separately.
Okay. So it's just like one role that would allow you to see the stuff from Business Central?
Well, so remember again that a lot of it is not seeing it; it's actually being synchronized, right? So
Right.
Your permissions on the or on the CRM side are kind of more relevant than.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and if you want to actually see it in Business Central, you do need a Business Central license to be able to open the Business Central app. But from there, what you can actually do with that stuff is going to be defined by your security and whatever additional licensing you have in the Business Central side.
Okay.
The synchronization itself is run by a service account, so the individual users aren't really relevant in that from that perspective. All right. Well, that's being super slow. All right. So it has finally completed the step. So we're going to hop back and go through kind of the rest of the configuration of this. There's a couple of things that have also changed. Ownership model. This is kind of a you have to understand a little bit about how security in CRM works to get this. So previously, the ownership model was basically an individual. So all of the records that came across would either be owned by the service account or by the salesperson that was linked to that record through the salesperson record in Business Central and the user record in CRM. So basically, you had to synchronize all of your salespeople to users in CRM, which sometimes made sense and sometimes didn't. And then again, the records would be kind of owned by all those individual people. If you use the team model, then all of the records end up getting owned by a team in customer engagement. So it's kind of easier for multiple people to see those records on the CRM side. One other thing that it's doing, and it's kind of calling this out right here, is that it's going to create a business unit and a team in the common data service. So one of the other things that allows you to do then is you can synchronize multiple companies of Business Central to one customer engagement environment. And those won't necessarily conflict. So you would have accounts from each of those companies in different business units. Questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay. So while this is working, so you'll notice like this is what I was talking about, right? So it created this team or business unit and team, and I guess this is the GUID of the instance and the name of the Cronus company or whatever. So all the records that are being synchronized across are coming with that as the owner. So this actually opened back up again. Let's see. So security roles. So there's one role for the CDS integration. And there's additional roles for, or sorry, that's the wrong. No, yeah. I think that might be the one that the integration account is actually using. And then these are the roles that are tied to this. So this is one I was talking about. Business Central product availability user gives them permission to be able to see that service. Okay, so the other part of this wizard is that it also kind of gives you it has this synchronization, and it's basically trying to say, what should you do? In general, the reason that this is saying dependency not satisfied is because I have contacts in both systems. I have all of these records in both systems, so it's saying I don't really know exactly what to do with that. All right, so I've completed my common data service one, and now I'm going to do the same thing for the CRM connection. So there are other options that you can want if you want in here. So this is saying I want to be able to publish the item availability service. Oh, right. So if you want to be able to use the item availability service, you need to configure a user to be able to get called through OData. So if you don't know how to do that, if you go to users, if we actually edit this user, you need to have generated a web service access key. So that's as simple as just clicking the change web service access key. And I'll just say that this one is never going to expire, so I don't have to worry about coming back in and changing it at some point. I'm going to copy this value. Probably write this down too, so I have it for if I need it. And then that becomes the password for the web service. Or actually, I guess I didn't need to write that down. It's just going to figure it out from what I have already in here. I'm not sure about that one. All right, while that's continuing to work. So I said there was some level of configuration. So if you go to like Dynamics 365 connection setup, so any of those settings that I just done on the wizard, you can obviously come back in here later and change. So if I said that, I do want to do sales order integration, I want to automatically process sales quotes or something, automatically create sales orders, that kind of stuff. You can kind of change those a little bit after the fact. The other thing is that this is where you would configure the integration table mappings, at least as much as you can through the front end. So this is giving me a list of, all of the connection or all of the mappings that already exist. So I was saying, this is where you can kind of say, how should this go? Should this be bidirectional? All of these are from the perspective of Business Central. So the integration table means CRM. So if it's bidirectional, it's going to go both directions. To integration table means from Business Central to CRM. From integration table means from CRM to Business Central. You can view the field mappings from here, but you can't change these. You have to do that in code. So you can sort of see these are the specific fields that are being mapped on a contact, right? So address goes to address 1, street 1 in CRM. So to the left is Business Central and the right is the customer engagement table. And then I mentioned also there's a filter on here. So this is kind of what it's doing right now. So it's saying, don't bring over any companies, or don't bring any over contacts that aren't associated with the company. And also, I guess, don't bring them over where they're this specific company for some reason. And then some of these also have, out of the box, have templates, but you could change and add to these. So the way that they're using this, for example, is that in customer engagement, the account record holds both customers and vendors. So to be able to segregate those, they're basically saying, when I synchronize a vendor to the account table from Business Central, then set the customer type code or relationship type to 11, which 11 happens to be vendor, right? So if I go look at this account in CRM, it'll have a relationship type that says it's vendor. In terms of just, overall troubleshooting, this integration sync log is kind of where you can sort of see, the run history per record type. And you can also kind of force a resync by clicking that run full synchronization. Or you can force it to synchronize records that have been modified since it ran the last time. And then finally, in terms of the things that I wanted to show at least, look at the job queue. So here are all the job queue entries that it created to run this synchronization. And you can see some of these are on hold, with inactivity timeout. So basically that's saying we ran this a few times, we didn't get a new customer, we've got nothing to do. Again, if I change to customer in CRM, this should in theory kick back on again. But there's also this inactivity timeout period, which I believe is in minutes. Yeah. So every 720 minutes, it'll try and kick back on again and go see if there's anything that needs to be pulled from CRM. So in a lot of cases, this is probably not enough if you have, most of it being, or not frequent enough if you have most of the activity for a particular record being on the CRM side. You'd probably want to come in and change that to, 30 minutes or something like that. All right, let's see if we've gotten, okay, so yeah, so in theory, this is all the way set up at this point and should be working in our new environment. So it takes a few minutes, but not a whole lot, to answer your question earlier, Jonathan. All right, that's what I'd hope to show on this. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to talk about?
So I noticed, Paul, like when you created the sales order in CRM, it came in with the name of the CRM sales order was the external document in C.
Yeah.
Which I imagine most companies are not going to want that. But that's on you. You would have to create the extension to change that.
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the things that's mapped automatically. It's relatively trivial to just turn that off. I don't, let's see. I don't remember if you can, you might be able to disable that through the front end. So looking at, am I just missing it? Okay. I must have not clicked something in that setup. So the fields, can I change this? Where was that? So some of these you can change them. But I'm actually not seeing. I'm not seeing. Oh, no, there. Wait, no, that's not it. I'm not seeing that field. So perhaps, yeah. So I guess that one specifically you do need. You would need to change that and cut. And the thing is, it's gotta. Well, I guess it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to have an external document number, right?
Business Central.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you may be able to turn it off. I never have.
Yeah. Name is required for a sales order in CRM, and if maybe if it is required, then it needs to, then it puts it in there. Yeah, I mean, obviously that would be some sort of opportunity for you to put like purchase order number or whatever, if you wanted to, because that's going to come across, but or change it. But yeah, you're right. That is the out of the box mapping.
Paul, you
Okay.
mentioned this came out of some demand with customers. I'm just curious what examples we have from real life requests trying to work with this. Do we have anybody that's got this working, or has this been exploratory to this point?
It's been, I think, mostly for prospects. Compumetics, we thought about potentially using it, but they're on an older version of Business Central, and they only needed just products. So I think we're probably just going to synchronize that using kind of a old school, just call the services directly method. Just not work. They also had two environments to synchronize, so going back to that whole the business unit thing didn't work in 2018, so it'd be harder to segregate those, all that kind of stuff. And then I forget, what was the other one? What was the one that you were looking at, Tyler?
That was Burst or SoftNAS. We were going to do it for them, but then they decided that they just didn't want to use Business Central. So, yeah.
Now, I think we've got one coming up that will use it, that we just did the BPR on last week, Rosa and I.
And then if you'll remember, this is definitely how I did it for top 10. I used this integration as the starting point.
Hey, Paul, this is Jason. We've got Ann and I and David Henderson are working on one with global ordinance too. So,
gotcha. Yeah. So like I said,
is the one.
Like I said, there's several that at least are interested in this, and just I think Ann thought it would be helpful for there to be a little bit more concrete knowledge on the team. So, all right. Well, that's all I had. Thank you, guys.